We are Heather and Paul Christie.
And for over 12 years, we've worked with executives and entrepreneurs to accelerate change in every aspect of their business.
Because we are in the fastest paced business environment that anyone has ever seen before.
So join us for the Evolve to Win show. Hey, and welcome to another Evolve to Win show with Heather and Paul, produced in partnership with Gulf Shore Business. I'm Paul and...
Hi, I'm Heather. And guess what? We are so lucky to have Bruce Turkel with us here today. Hi, Bruce. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you. How are y'all doing?
Doing great. Thanks.
Great, Bruce.
Now, I want to talk to the listeners about why they want to hear Bruce. You want to drop everything, unless, of course, you're driving, then just focus. But Bruce is like the brand master, right? So if Bruce isn't creating brands or books or explaining brand strategy to somebody on national TV, he is energetic, he's creative, he is making brands more valuable. And he's worked with brands like American Express. He's done campaigns with American Express, with Hasbro, Miami, Discovery, and many, many more top brands. And he is on national TV, Fox, MSNBC, CNN. You've been featured on Fast Company. There's so many, New York Times, Forbes. And you have 5 books on branding as well. Is that right?
That's right.
God, I don't know where you find the time.
Yeah, and before anybody you're listening to, and you're like, oh, branding really doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm maybe just, I work for a company, or, maybe I'm a leader of a company, but our branding is done by somebody else. I really want you to listen to this podcast because it is really important that you listen to what Bruce is going to share with you on what branding truly is, because it really changed my way of thinking around how you brand and how you sustain the branding of your company, and how in just an instant your brand can change either good or bad for you. So
you will never look at your brand the same way again after listening to this podcast. Yeah. Bruce, I want you to kick us off by just helping us understand how you got into this branding world and really became as successful as you are. I mean, you're working with some massive companies and, the top national networks. How'd you do?
Well, I was in the ad agency business. I was trained as a designer, as an art director, and I worked in ad agencies. And then I started an ad agency because I thought I knew what I was doing. My father called it the confidence of ignorance. And I had no idea what I was doing, but nobody bothered to tell me. So I built the business, and we grew and grew, and we were doing very well. And we worked for some of those clients that you talked about. But around the turn of the century, from the 20th to the 21st century, it dawned on me that the value of what we did was so powerfully influenced by what consumers already thought about the products we were working for. And you think that's advertising, but it's really not. It's, as Paul said earlier, it's the power of the brand and how that brand value actually determines why somebody wants to buy a product or a service or not. And at the same time, as we moved into this new technological internet connected world that we live in, it dawned on me that the ability of your product or service to actually do the job is becoming less and less important. Because today, all products work, all products are good, all services are available and really ubiquitous, right? You can get work on your business from your local community, but you can go online and find people to work on your business from anywhere in the world. So the ability to get the work done, which is very 20th century, it's how we existed for all those years, is no longer so critical. I'm not suggesting you don't have to be good at what you do. You have to be the best at what you do. But just because you are, that's not enough. Example, if you think about every one of us and everybody watching this podcast or listening knows a guitar player who is awesome, virtuoso. It's a buddy of yours, a cousin, whatever. And you say he or she, they're so good, they're better than Clapton, they're better than Hendrix. And in fact, they might be. It's very possible. But if all they do is sit home and play their arpeggios, all day long, whoever's going to hear them. Are they better than John Mayer or Kenny Wayne Shepherd? Could be. The ability to do the job is not what makes those other people so successful. It's the value of the brand. And so I started changing my business and changing the work we did for our clients to say, look, let's not worry about selling this sale or selling this product. Let's worry about making your company something that resonates with your consumer. and more importantly, with your potential consumer. And so I started researching what happens, how that happens. And I looked not just at business, but I looked at politics, I looked at religion, I looked at all of art, all of the areas where people are selling things where the consumer really is not qualified to decide if that thing is good or bad. What's that old saying about art? I don't know if it's good or bad, I just know what I like. Mm-hmm. That's not a way to determine if a product is well done or not, right? But that's how we do it. And that's how politicians are elected. And that's how people choose religions and stay connected to their religion or change. And that's how people pick art. And it's how people pick your business, your product, or your service. So that was the transition.
All right. So I'm thinking that there are going to be a number of people listening, as Paul said, who work for a company, right? So they're not necessarily the business owner. If you've got an executive or a manager in a company, what does this whole concept of brand actually mean to them? I mean, did they have a responsibility for the brand? Is there something they need to be worried about or focused on?
Oh, totally. And great question, because they have to do it on two different planes. They have to be concerned about the brand of the business they work for. That's their job. That's why they're paid. They have to build the brand. They have to protect the brand. They have to reinforce the brand. But remember also, they are within a hierarchy. They are within a structure where they want to excel. Are they simply going to excel by their work? You know, you're a recovering attorney, so you know that law firms function with those three positions: finders, minders, and grinders. Right? Finder gets the work. The minder is the customer service person, and then the grinder actually does the work. Back to what we talked about earlier. You can be an awesome grinder, the best at doing the work there is. Are you going to be at the top of the firm, making the most money, getting your name on the door? Guess what? You're not. And so it becomes critical within a business, if you want to advance, if you want to get raises, if you want to get the better projects, or heck, if you just want to keep your job, it becomes critical to become that indispensable person. And how do you do that? You build your brand. Because we all know there's plenty of people who are putting in the hours, putting in the work, and they're getting no remuneration other than their pay.
So how many, you think about that, how many people have we talked to or have we worked with who are in a place of frustration because they've been for the company for X number of years? They are the best technically skilled person in that company, up for that next position, and the company decides to hire externally, or the company decides to promote somebody else who doesn't appear to be, and maybe quite frankly, from a skill-based perspective, is not as qualified. How much of that has to do with building that personal brand?
Well, I would say probably all of it. Yeah. Because why does a company look outside if, in fact, they have great people inside? And the reason is because those folks outside, we actually haven't worked with them. We actually haven't seen their work. We've seen what we've been told they did. We've seen what we heard they did. We've read their CV, or we've read the articles, or we've read their blog posts, or we've watched their videos, or whatever. Those are all brand manifestations, right? Those are all ways that person as a product has told the world, here's who I am, here's what I do. Here's a really important thing to remember. We all know that brands reinforce the sale, right? So if you go to a great restaurant and then someone says, how was dinner? And you say, well, I went to Nobu, it was awesome, right? Or I went to Burns, or I went to wherever. How was that car you just bought? Well, I bought a Mercedes, I bought a Ferrari. The brand reinforces the sale. We know that. Mm-hmm. But what we don't think about is the fact that the brand pre-enforces the sale. Before I walk into that restaurant, before I get into that car, before I hire that employee, I have already made my mind up of the quality of what I'm going to get. If I'm going into a local diner or a fast food restaurant, if I'm getting into I borrow a car from a friend and it's not a very good car, I already know the experience I'm going to have. So the brand pre-enforces the sale. If you are within an organization or you're looking to find a job outside your organization, it behooves you to build a brand that pre-enforces the experience that the employer is going to have with you.
Okay. So maybe you can help some of the listeners that are grinders. So there's grinders out there and they know that, you know, they're doing the work. They're the ones that are right. That are grinding out every day. They're producing, they're high performers in production, but they're not that happy that they're not being recognized as one of, somebody
Right.
that, yeah.
It's easy.
How would you help somebody in a personal, way of increasing their brand?
So let me tell you that it's easy. I love the question because I have an easy answer for it.
Good.
But your listeners might not like it that much unless they can remove the personal from it. They need to look at this at a 50,000 foot view, because we are not talking about them as human beings. We're talking about them as products or services. When I do the work I do on television, I'm not me. I'm a product or service. I know that. And if someone says to me, hey, you said that funny, or your hair looked funny, I don't take that as an insult. I take it as a way of making the product better.
Okay.
So
I want to stop for just 1 second there to make sure that I understand that, because I think this is a really, really important piece of this conversation. To get to that higher level, we have to be thinking of ourselves not as who we believe ourselves to be, but thinking of ourselves instead as a product or service. Is that right?
Absolutely. The way you say it to your friends is get over yourself, right?
Yeah.
You are not, they say if you're going to get on stage, or you're going to be on TV, or you're going to do something in front of people, if you ask for advice, someone will tell you, be yourself, right? You've heard that a million times. Be yourself, be yourself. I would suggest that you don't be yourself. You be a hyper-realized version of yourself, because that's what the brand is. It's who you are, but even better. It's why men put on suits and ties. It's why women take the time to do their hair, put on makeup, and dress appropriately, because we are becoming hyper-realized versions of ourselves. Ourselves might be boxer shorts and flip-flops and a t-shirt, right? That's how we're comfortable.
Yeah.
But that's not how you present yourself. So when you make that change, you're already doing this. You're enhancing your brand.
Is it kind of like an alter ego?
Sure,
Kind
it
of
is.
thing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's a better version of you.
Okay.
I'm suggesting that you be yourself. You be honest. You be authentic. Absolutely. You just do it a little bit better.
Is it separating the emotional, the emotional side of yourself, not being so connected to your emotions and what people think of you, and just recreating yourself as the person that you want to be?
Well, let me give you an example.
Okay.
Years ago, I was invited to speak at the Florida Speakers Association, and it was a big thrill for me because this was before I did all the speaking that I do now. And they gave me a big slot, and my speaking mentor, he's passed away since, but it was a guy by the name of Joaquin de Posada. And he taught me the business. His opinion meant more to me than anything. So I told him I was doing this speech, and he said that he would be there. And I was both thrilled and terrified at the same time, because I was thrilled that my mentor was going to be there, and I was terrified that my mentor was going to be there, right? It was my blessing and my curse. I really didn't care about the other people in the room because I cared about him. So I get there, they call my name, I get up on stage, and Joaquin is not there. So you can see that I'm already like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. He's not here. And I do my talk, and I'm doing my talk, and he's not there. And I get about halfway through, and he comes in the door. Okay, he was late, but he's here. I feel better. He sits in the back row. That was fine. And then he proceeds to yawn through my entire speech. But I don't mean yawn like those National Geographic shows with the hippopotamuses where they open their mouth and the birds fly in and clean their teeth, right? That's how he's yawning. So of course I am devastated. Now, I know the rule, never let him see you sweat. So I don't tell anybody. I do my job. I finish. I'm a professional. I think I did an okay job. But I'm just devastated. I now have to walk through the crowd, all the people sitting in the auditorium, to get to him. He's in the back. And of course, everybody wants to stop and say, that was awesome. You changed my life. I love how you said that. I heard none of it, because all I'm thinking is my mentor was yawning like he was catching flies. I was that bad. I get all the way to the back, and Joaquin says, Bruce, and he had a heavy accent. Bruce, that was wonderful. He gives me a hug. That was so great. I don't buy it, right? I said, come on, Joaquin. You couldn't even make it on time. And then the rest of the speech, all you were doing is yawning. I was so bad, you could barely stay awake. He says to me, do you know where I was yesterday? I said, no, I have no idea. He said, I was in China. I was presenting in China. I promised you I would be here. I flew for 32 hours straight. I came from the airport to here to hear you. You were amazing. I am so tired that I can barely keep my eyes open. Okay, I know that was a long story, but what's the lesson? It had nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
It's not
Get
about
over
me.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Then every bit of input he gave me, every bit of constructive criticism I could hear, right? Because now I realize he was there for me. Look how much this man cared. Look how much he loved me to actually go through that to get there. Certainly what he was going to tell me was useful. But if he had started by saying, you should do this, and at this point you should do that, I wouldn't have bought any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Get over yourself. So I was a product up on stage, and he was the audience. I don't know why people in the audience aren't paying attention to me. Maybe some guy just found out his kid flunked out of school. Maybe some guy just heard that his new Ferrari was delivered, and he just wants to get out of the room to go see it, right? How do I know? How do you know? If you're the product, if you're the grinder, get over yourself. And now let's talk about what you can do to change your perception. And it's very simple.
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
Ready.
It's not about the work. Stop talking about how good the work you do is. Stop thinking that if you stay till 10 o'clock at night and you show up at 7 and you fill out all the forms and you do your timesheets or whatever, anybody is going to care. What matters is how what you do affects and improves the life of the person who holds your life in their hands, meaning your boss. So forget that you wrote the best tort ever, or you did the best spreadsheet ever, or you figured out how to amortize the payments across 17 years of tax returns. And show how that insight, that hard work made your customer, your boss, better. Start talking about them. I mean, here, I have it right here. What's the title of my last book? All about
Them.
Get over yourself and start figuring out how you matter in the life and, more importantly, the aspirations of your audience. And again, if you're working in a job, your boss, your supervisor, the board of directors, I don't know the company you're in, but those people, the senior partners, are your customers. And start figuring out how what you do makes their lives better and express that. If you do that, you build a brand, not a brand about yourself, because your brand is not about you. Your brand is about how you change the lives, achieve the aspirations of your customer.
Okay, Bruce. Love it. Love the concept. How do I not become a kiss ass?
Great question. I'm not suggesting you give up your authentic self, right? If you are a kiss ass, what you're saying is, whatever you want, boss, I'll do it. I'm there for
Right.
you. Great job.
Yes, man.
Right. But you already said, we're talking about these people who have excellent service, excellent product, excellent abilities.
Right.
So what you have to figure out is, here's what I provide. I am the product, right? We already made that clear. Here's what I provide. Here's what my customer is looking for. They are my boss. And more importantly than what they're looking for, what their aspirations are, and find out where that intersects. So if you're an accounting firm, for example, and your boss's aspiration is to be the number one new business person in the firm, what you have to demonstrate is how the work you do saves tax payments to such an incredible extent that anyone who understands it is going to hire that firm.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not going to hire you because you're the guy doing the work, but they're going to hire your boss. But your boss needs to know that what you provide is what he or she needs to accomplish what they want. I'm not suggesting you tell them how great you are. That's a waste of time. That's useless.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I'm suggesting you show them how what you do makes them better. I mean, think about what they say to married couples, right? You've seen it in all those romantic comedies. You complete me. You fulfill me. I'm a better person when you're around.
Mm-hmm.
But
But I
that's
am.
It's true.
But I am.
Better together.
you guys let me know when you're done,
He's
okay?
like,
No, but it's true. I just had my 32nd wedding anniversary the other day.
happy anniversary.
Thank you. We
Yeah,
talked
happy
about
anniversary.
that. People think I'm nice because Gloria is such a wonderful, warm person. It works out beautifully.
She's part of your brand strategy, right?
He's totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Anything I'm invited to with an opportunity to bring her,
Mm-hmm.
I bring her. And then people, all they can do is tell me, oh, your wife is so wonderful. She's so warm. She's so beautiful. And all of that rubs off on me.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm not totally mercenary about that. I know that. Think about how you make their lives better. And you don't have to tell them. They'll figure it out, right? Because they know what they want to accomplish. And if you become the tool that helps them do that, they accomplish that. The ass kiss is the person who keeps telling them how great they are. That doesn't do anything. That doesn't accomplish anything. Unless, of course, your boss is a megalomaniac, in which case all of this goes out the window and you tell them how great they are.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to take just a little bit of a turn here to talk about media. So, you've worked with some of the biggest brands out there, brands that everyone recognizes. And yet most of our listeners are probably going to be more in the, maybe the mid-size space or not have the Fortune 500 budget to do the kind of advertising and brand work that some of the bigger companies do. So how do you take this branding message and for a smaller or mid-sized company? What can they be doing short of, these ad spends? I mean, there's so many different ways of doing it. What's your top hack, top strategy to get a consistent brand message out for companies these days?
Let me tell you why I love this question. Because if you had asked me this 20 years ago, I would have thrown my hands up and said, I don't really know. Yeah. We don't have the resources, and communication is one way. Companies pay money to speak to consumers. Consumers have no choice but to listen. Billboards, television, radio ads, whatever. But today, that's totally flipped on its head because social media is available to everybody. Mm-hmm. And social media is free. It doesn't mean doing the work is free, and it doesn't mean it doesn't take a lot of your time, effort, strategizing, creativity, and on and on and on. But today, we all have the opportunity to reach out. On LinkedIn, for example, the last time I looked, I had 137,000 followers. Wow. I have, if I add everything up, my blog posts, my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my Instagram, I have about 250,000 followers. That's more people than read the Miami Herald every day. Much more. So theoretically, I have more reach than somebody who buys an ad in the Miami Herald. Now, if you're saying to me, yeah, but I don't have social media, well, then it becomes like the old saying about the best time to plant an oak tree, which is either 20 years ago or right now. Get started. Figure out who you're trying to reach. Figure out what they read. There's a great story, old school story, by the way, of a kid who wanted to take over his father's business in the 60s in New York City. And his father was getting old, but was old school and didn't believe the kid had it in him to do it. So the kid made a deal. He said, Dad, I'll tell you what, let me start with advertising. Well, we spend all this money on advertising. I can't trust you with that. The kid said, no problem, Dad. Just give me $50,000. Let me show you what I can do with $50,000. And then if I do a good job, you can then give me more of the responsibility. So the father said yes. So the kid took the $50,000 and spent it in advertising. The next morning, Dad got up, had his coffee, opened his newspaper, and there was an ad for his company right there in the sports section of the newspaper. He then left, went down to the subway station that he went to every day, and right there on the subway station was a billboard for his company. He got in the subway, the same one he rode every day, and right there in the subway was a sign for the business. He then went to his office, got his coffee, turned on the radio to the news program, and when the ads came on, what came on? An ad for his company. This goes on, but I'll spare you the long story. Guy gets home that night, says to his son, I've never seen anything like this. With only $50,000, we were everywhere. You have the promotion you want. Now, we know what happened, right?
All right.
He'd only bought one subway station, only bought 2 trains, only bought 1 radio station because his audience was his father. Mm-hmm. And he knew his father's media consumption habits. So if you're using social media, understand who your audience is. By the way, I hate to say this, most of your listeners do not know who their audiences are. And I'm not picking on them. Most business people do not know who their audiences are because they have not been focused all about them. They've been focused on themselves. I manufacture widgets, pies, tennis balls, but I never stop and think who I manufacture them for. But if you know who your audience is, you then research them. You figure out what their media consumption habits are, social media. You then put your efforts into those social media platforms, and you'll get the results you want.
Yeah, it was interesting. Last night we were watching some basketball, and we were with our goddaughter Bailey, and a commercial came on. And these days, watching commercials, you just don't do it unless you're watching a live sport, right? And so the commercial for Papa John's comes on, And before the commercial ended, she goes, "Better pizza." And I was like, I just heard that off. I was in the kitchen and I heard it and I said, "Did you just say better pizza?" And she goes, "Yeah." And then 2 seconds later, Papa John says, "Papa John's, better pizza." And I said, you know what? That's the way we used to do it. And that's the way the only people can play in that game anymore are the Fortune 50, the Fortune whatever. It is with gobs of cash to be able to go in and just blanket a market with their message. And it does work. So repetition does work.
It totally
right?
works.
But in this day and age, nobody has the budget like that, like a Papa John's, that's a mom and pop shop anymore. Even the mid-sized businesses don't have the budgets for that. So what do you tell them to do?
How do they get that repetition?
Your great story just made my point, because if you're a pizza purchaser, how old is Bailey?
20.
Okay. So if you're a pizza purchaser, a 20-year-old woman is smack dab in your consuming set, right?
Yeah.
But if the folks listening to your podcast are not reaching for that audience, not reaching for a ubiquitous audience, then having everybody know who you are and what you do is simply a matter of ego. It's not a strong business strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And if Bailey, for example, knows what I do for a living, guess how much money that makes me?
This much.
Zero. That's right. That's right. I'm not in the pizza. I actually grew up in the pizza business. My dad owned pizza restaurants, but I'm no longer in the pizza business, right? So having her know that is not very valuable to me. However, having all of your listeners know who I am and what I do is incredibly valuable. They may choose to hire me, or they talk to other business people and say, "Oh my God, you have to listen to this blog post, this podcast. You have to read this book." This is right in my wheelhouse to reach out to the audiences I want. Now, to be perfectly honest, let's go a step further. How much am I paying to be on your program?
Zero.
So I'm taking advantage of your audience. Mm-hmm. And by the way, you've been very, very gracious and are thanking me for being on your show. This is what I was talking about, what I have to offer, what your aspirations are. I have to offer my knowledge and experience in building brands. Your aspiration is to build this show, to reach out to all these people, to have them know that you're a great resource for this kind of information. Mm-hmm. Bam! We just hit exactly on how this relationship works. We both, or all three of us, benefit from this, and it didn't cost any of us any money. Mm-hmm. So when you go back to your original question, hey, I'm not a big company, I don't have those resources, my answer would be, you're watching exactly right here how this works. Mm-hmm. And Bailey might listen to the show because you're her godparents, or she might not. But in my mind, other than my ego, doesn't really matter. From a business point of view, the folks who are in their offices taking the time, or better yet, working at home watching this, right? Because they don't do it during office hours. And then they're scribbling notes. That's my audience. That's your audience. And we're giving them value. So everybody benefits.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And, it just made me think of, and I want to say before I forget, that the other really incredible thing, this is one of the benefits of being connected with the National Speakers Association, is that Bruce has agreed to be our keynote speaker for our June Florida Speakers Association meeting. So for all of you who are listening or watching anywhere in South Florida, he's coming to Naples on June 9th, and you do not want to miss spending a morning with him. So you can find that information at floridaspeakers.org. We'll leave that in the show notes. But, this is a great way too, Bruce. You're going to have people who listen to this and say, I wish I could get, a little bit of time with Bruce. They can start by coming to Florida Speakers Association or even getting in touch with you directly.
Absolutely.
So that's really cool. Now, I want to go back to asking you a question. In part, it's selfish because I really want to know, but I know there are other people hoping that one of us asks this question. How in the world did you get to 250,000-ish followers across your social media platforms?
And how long has it been?
Well, that's a great question, because I will tell them what worked and what didn't work. I have about, 11 or 12,000 on Twitter. I have been stuck at 11 and 12,000 on Twitter for 2 years. I don't know why. I started and it just ramped up, boom, 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 until about 11,000. And then it just kind of, it just stopped. I don't know why. My blog post, which I have about 28,000 people who subscribe to my blog. I have been writing a blog post every Wednesday since 2007. So that's been a lot of work over 10, 11 years. And every time I speak at conferences, people give me their cards, or they can go online. There's a lot of ways to do it, which I'll sell myself later and tell them. But that grew very slowly and with a lot of work. But my LinkedIn following, about 2 years ago, my assistant, Scott Cabrera, who is a genius, took my blog posts every week that I'm writing anyways, so I can't say it's more work because I'd already done it. And he would read the post and join the appropriate groups that I talk about their businesses. So if I was talking about marketing for tourism, he would join tourism groups. If I was talking about political branding, he would join political groups. And then he would post within those groups and then bring up a conversation within those groups. And within 2 years, I went from 5,000 followers to 137,000 followers.
Wow.
So that's almost
no time. Groups, and he used very targeted groups, and he used specific conversation starters that were important for those groups because you had content that was good, that was great for those groups. Is that right? That's right. But remember what we talked about earlier. The content was not the key. I mean, it had to be good, or why are you going to read it if it's not good, right? But what he did was he figured out the people whose aspirations would be met by what I was writing. Every so often, just because it's my obsession, because we travel so much in what we do, I write about traveling light and how much easier it makes your travel. So when I love those blogs, by the way. Thank you. I love them. I'm pretty psycho about it, as you know. But he would post those in all these travel places, which brings all of those people in. Now, they're coming to me because I'm talking about travel, but they all are in business. Not all of them are interested in what I talk about in business, but some of them are. And that grew the network. Sometimes I talk about music because I'm a big music fan, musician, everything else. So he would post those in those blogs. Those people come in. Well, a lot of people, music is their hobby, but they are lawyers, business people, whatever. And that would grow it. So it was, again, a matter of taking who I am and what I do, that's this part of the chart, and the aspirations of the consumer, that's this part of the chart, and finding where they meet. By doing that, he was able to grow my LinkedIn following to a huge number. So this, what people are not seeing who are just listening to this on audio, is that you're making sort of an X with your fingers and showing that intersection of, you know, what you have in the aspirations of others. And, you know, that's really, you go over that quite a bit in your book. It's all about them. Right? Do. Yeah. So I highly encourage our listeners, if you want to get some more on this, grab Bruce's book. Now, you have been able to land the most awesome media gigs out there, right? So I remember when there was that guy that got dragged off the United plane.
It was a doctor, I think, on United. It was overbooked, and they United sent their people to go grab the guy off the plane.
He wasn't getting up. I guess.
Pulled their phones out and started recording them.
And so our national media outlets are calling on you to give us your input on what did that do to the brand of United. And what I'm really interested about is not so much the story, although feel free to tell any of it that you want to, but I'm really interested in how did you get all over the national media? Why did they reach out to you?
Well, thank you for asking that. I'd like to say it's because they all know me as this brand genius, this brand leader, and perhaps that's true, but I think there's another story, which is, this is the inside scoop.
Okay.
For your folks. I had spent the last 4 years developing relationships with the bookers and the producers at all these networks. I had let them know that if they needed input on branding and marketing issues, I was the guy to turn to. And I do that, and this is the secret, by writing what's called a segment concept. Every time there's something in the news that is appropriate to my expertise, I write a segment concept, and it's titled Segment Concept, and then there's a provocative headline. And then there's a line or two of copy that very simply says, this just happened. This guy was dragged off an airplane, for example. This is what is going to happen to United's brand. And then I send that to all of these bookers and all of these producers. I probably send, 5 or 6 of them a week. None of them get picked up, by the way, but I'm constantly reminding them that when you have a story on this sort of issue, I'm the guy who knows what's going on. So that's step one. Then occasionally you get invited. They'll call up and say, hey, what do you know about whatever issue? And then I write an opinion piece. So I'll write a paragraph on both sides of the issue, the part I agree with and the part I disagree with. Why? Because producers and bookers of TV stations are experts in being producers and bookers. They are not experts in marketing, in medical technology, in oil shale extraction, in legal extortion documents. So they have to do all these stories that they really don't know anything about. So I give them the information because let's face it, I know everything about that, just like you know everything about what you do. And every one of your listeners knows everything about sprinkler pump installation or infectious diseases or whatever it is they do. So I say to them, this happened, here's why. You might remember that 2 years ago, this happened, which caused this. I believe blah, blah, blah. But if I was disagreeing with this point, I would believe blah, blah, blah. And I send that to them. Why? It does all their work for them. They don't have to go do the research as long as they know they can trust me, which is that relationship we talked about. Now they have both sides of the issue covered. I've told them what I'm going to do. They either have to find someone for the other side or the anchor can take the other side. But the work is done. Go back to my chart, the X for the people who are listening. What I'm good at is understanding branding issues. What they're good at is being on television and looking smart. They want to look smart. If I give them the information to make them look smart, but the anchor is not my customer. The booker is my customer. And what is the booker's aspiration? To become a producer. What's the producer's aspiration? To become head producer. How do they do that? By making their bosses, the anchors, look smart. It's the same theory I've been telling you about all along. It's all about them. It's not, hey, look at me. I have nice hair and I have a big smile and I look really good on television. I'm making this up, by the way. I'm not. But that's what most people do. Most people send, look at me, look at me, look at me. Here's what I've done. Here's what I'm good at. I mean, I'm watching you guys on, you guys both have beautiful smiles, perfect teeth, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Both of you. But I see that. You don't have to tell me that. Instead, I talk about how me being on their program or me being a resource to them makes their lives better. It's the same theory.
And you make it so easy for them. You make it so easy. Here it is, here it is, here it is. And then, but you do this 5 or 6 times a week.
I do.
Pulling from everything that's happening out there today. And then every now and then the jackpot, right? Every now and then they pick it up but that's a lot of work to put in.
Well, how else do you think these things happen? What's that old expression? If it was easy, everyone would do it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Unless you're a 5-year-old kid who uses the word apparently a lot. That was hilarious. You talk about how things just go viral, right? You've got a kid who has this quick little video that we wouldn't have known about unless we had young ones staying with us. And then gets invited on Ellen 5 different times and is taking all these trips around the world. So it's like, what is that unique thing that you have and how does that intersect with what people want, right?
So let me build on that thought for a moment, because people say to me all the time, do you know how to get on television? I say, yes. They say, how do you do it? I say, there's 2 ways. Land a plane in the Hudson River, or let me show you the hard way to do it. The easy way is to land the plane in the Hudson River, right? Nobody knew who Captain Sullenberg was the day before that happened. Right. Nobody knew who your apparently kid was, or the one who sang that Bruno Mars song, the little 4-year-old, to Ellen. My wife watches that all the time, right? If you can figure out how to do that, knock yourself out. Go do it. If you have that unique talent, ability, look, thought, and you can tell me that you can make it viral, go do it. Go land your plane in the Hudson River and save 187 people and have a movie made from you with Tom Cruise. That's the easy way. But if you can't do that, I'm telling you the other way to do it. Other than those 2 ways, I don't know how else you do it.
Yeah, but I think the point is too that there are probably too many people out there trying to think how they could make something go viral instead of just doing the consistent and persistent work, which is what really gets you to be recognized through the media, right? All right.
Back to get over yourself, right?
Get over yourself.
Figure this out and just go do the work.
Yeah. I would like to just keep going and have a segment 2 and a segment 3 on this. But I know that we all have things that we have to go do. I want to wrap by really asking you, what can people do to reach out to you? How can they find you? What do you recommend for them?
It's very easy. My website is simply my name, bruceturkel.com. Turkel has one L, by the way. So Bruce, you can spell. Turkel is Turkel, one word, .com. And there's a contact. Like on most websites, click the contact, send me an email, boom, you're in touch with me. The other thing you can do, if you want, you can text the word them, because my book was all about them, to the number 72,000, 72000. It will send you the first chapter of my next book, which is called Brandisms, and then you'll be on my blog list, and we can get in touch that way as well. And then you can send me an email, send me a text, whatever you want. I am very available. I respond fairly quickly, and I'm here to help.
Awesome. Thank you for those resources. Thanks for sending that chapter out to our listeners. And to all of you who are listening today or watching, thanks for joining us on this episode of Evolve to Win, produced in partnership with Gulf Shore Business Magazine, and for really getting some great tips from Bruce Turkel. And, the one thing that we didn't get to do, which we'd be remiss if we didn't just throw this out at the very last second, Bruce actually played in front of his biggest audience to date yesterday when he was a headliner with his band playing in front of 10,000 people, right?
We did.
Festival. So what was that like? And can you maybe send us off with a little tune?
I would be delighted to. It was great fun, first of all. I thought I would be very nervous, and in fact, it was just awesome. And one of the things we did, we played Suffragette City, the David Bowie song. And at the end, it's got that line, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And we got 10,000 people to yell it out. I can't even tell you how exciting that was. But back to what we talked about. Let's make this a worthwhile business tip. So for me, music is something that I've been doing since I was a little kid. I've always been involved. I realized early on I was not good enough to be a professional at it. However, it's something that I care about very much. So I use it in my talks. I play music in my talks. I talk about how people can take their passions and utilize them. Why? Because it's back to that cross, right? If you want to help somebody achieve what they want and you know what their passions are, then you have a real opportunity to demonstrate to them your value. And so when I speak, I play music on stage. If the only thing people remember when I'm done is, oh, that was an awesome speech, and I really love that tall guy who played music, that's okay, because that builds that sense of connection. However, I go a step further. I teach everyone in the audience how to play, and I give them instruments. And I teach them how to play a very simple song that they all know. Why? Because everybody wants to be a rock star. Everybody wants to play music. That's an aspiration. They did research. 95% of CEOs of Fortune 500s, these are people who have the private planes and the huge salaries and the stock options. If they were all asked, what would you do if you were not a CEO? And they all said, rock. Well, 95% said rock star. I think 5% said baseball or football, right? So if everybody wants that and I can make that happen, I can help people achieve their aspiration. And then what do they do when they go home? They go, look, honey. And then they play what I taught them. So I do it quite simply by just carrying one of these around. I don't have to carry a trumpet or a guitar. I just carry a harmonica. And I teach them. And if they can go home and go, if they can do that, or they can do something a little bit easier, boom, I got them. And
that's awesome.
Listening has something you're awesome at, whether it's growing orchids or baking pies or running in marathons or whatever it is. And if you can figure out a way to share it, share a little bit of your authentic truth to help your consumers reach their aspirational goals, everything else is easy.
Bruce, this was so great. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with our audience. You have yourself a fantastic day. And thanks again to
all of our listeners.
Yeah. And
it was great to be with you today, Bruce, and can't wait to connect with you again next month at the Florida Speakers Association, and again live and in person in Naples in June.
Yep. We'll see you then.
Thank you both.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.